IIP. I would like to welcome you all today for this webinar on the topic Limitation Act versus vis-a-vis IBC. On the basis of this judgment, Supreme Court judgment dated 14th August 2020. We have total 300 in registrations today for this webinar. Attendees are questions can be asked by participants at the question and answer section, which is there at the bottom. Now I would request PK Malhotra sir to just welcome Balwinder Singh sir and Ahuja sir for today's webinar. Over to you, sir.
Honorable Shri Balwinder Singh ji, Honorable Member, National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, my dear friend, Company Secretary Sanjeev Ahuja ji, who is also insolvency professional, distinguished participants, on behalf of the ICSI IIP, I welcome you all to this webinar on the issue of Limitation Act vis-a-vis the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code. In fact, we decided to hold this webinar more particularly keeping in view the judgment delivered by the Supreme Court in the last week, to be precise, on 14th of August 2020, in the case of Babulal Vardharji Gurjar versus Veer Gurjar Aluminium Industries Limited. And in this case, the judgment runs into around 71 pages, where the Supreme Court has overruled the decision given by the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal with regard to the issue of limitation, and the Supreme Court has come to the conclusion that in this particular case, in the facts and circumstances of the case, it is barred by limitation. Now, I think it's a detailed judgment which not only considers the provision of the IBC as well as the Limitation Act, it also considered the various judgments which have been given by the Supreme Court in the past. And the Supreme Court analyzed the relevant provision of IBC, Limitation Act, its previous judgment on the subject, and observed that based on the facts of the case, application made by the respondent under Section 7 of the Code in the month of March 2018, seeking initiation of CIRP in respect of corporate debtor with specific assertion of the date of default as 8th July 2011 is clearly barred by limitation for having been filed much later than the period of these years, 3 years from the date of default as stated in the application. And the court has also observed that NCLT has not examined this issue of limitation while passing the order, whereas NCLAT has examined this question of limitation on considerations which are not relevant to the case. I think this is one observation made by the court. An attempt on the part of the respondent to save the limitation with reference to the principle of acknowledgement having been found unsustainable. This is again the observation made by the Supreme Court in its order, and therefore the Supreme Court has set aside the order passed by NCLAT. Now, I would not like to go into the detail of it because we have two distinguished panelists here today. We have guest of honor, Shri Balwinder Singh ji, who is Honorable Member of the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, who is there for more than last 4 years and passed number of judgments on the subject, and has been a very important pillar in laying down the law under the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code in interpreting various provisions of the law. Just to give a small introduction of Honorable Balwinder Singh ji, he started his career with the State Bank of India as an officer way back in 1978. Then he joined the Indian Audited Accounts Service in the highest level of the Indian Audited Accounts Service, the post of Deputy C&AG, which is the highest level which an Indian Audited Accounts Service officer can reach. And there he contributed a lot in the various reports which have been prepared under his guidance and under his supervision. And as I said, during the last 4 years, his contribution in the development of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has also been very important. Now, just one more comment which I would like to make, because Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code was passed in the shortest possible time by the Parliament. And during the last 3 years of its operation, 4 times the law has been amended. Why? Because it was passed in a shorter time, and probably people were not aware about many of the consequences that are likely to come. Therefore, the job of the adjudicating authority as well as that of the appellate authority became very, very important in laying down the law and in interpreting the law. And the contribution made by the NCLT as well as NCLAT cannot by any stretch of imagination be undermined. Only thing is the final appeal goes to the Supreme Court, and whatever law is declared by the Supreme Court becomes final and binding on all authorities, including the tribunals. So this judgment has come, and it definitely has repercussions and implications in the future case to be decided, more particularly on the point of limitation, though there are many other observations also. And therefore, in addition to Shri Balwinder Singh ji, we have with us Shri Sanjeev Ahuja ji, who is again an insolvency professional and a practicing company secretary also. I often interact with him in the Institute of our insolvency professionals because he is also in some of the committees. And I find him quite active so far as the implementation of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code is concerned, and his interaction with the insolvency professionals. I see him very actively participating in the deliberations which are taking place in some of the industry forums, including the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So I won't take much time. I welcome both the panelists today here, and definitely like to hear. And what I would suggest for consideration of both the panelists is that maybe Mr. Sanjeev Ahuja ji can make some opening remarks with regard to the judgment for about 5 minutes. Then I will request Shri Balwinder Singh ji to kindly elaborate the judgment and his views on this particular judgment, and what is the future course of action which needs to be taken, and what are the issues which have arisen. And once Shri Balwinder Singh ji has given, our guest of honor has given his comments on this, then we will keep the floor open, and Sanjeev Ahuja ji will be taking certain questions from the participants as well as the doubts which are coming to our mind. All those will be considered during today's webinar. So I welcome you all and hand over the floor to Shri Sanjeev Ahuja ji for his opening remark before we request our guest of honor to give his views on the judgment and the future course of action which is expected to be followed. Sanjeev ji, floor is yours.
Great, sir. Thanks a lot. Very good afternoon, Mr. Singh. Namaskar, sir. Good afternoon to you, Mr. Malhotra, and the ICSI IPA team. And finally, a very good afternoon to all the participants. Now, we're all here to actually, have from Mr. Singh his views about, the judgment, as, Mr. Malhotra said in his opening remark. So, sir, I'll just take a couple of minutes, and then probably, I'll kind of, leave the floor for you. After we hear from you, then later we'll get into a bit more session. So, friends, we have the Honorable Supreme Court giving its judgment on this applicability of the provisions of the Limitation Act with respect to IBC. Now, as an order of the Apex Court, we understand, we just heard this is the law of the land, it's binding and all, which is absolutely okay. Today's discussion is hence an academic discussion, but we'll try and understand the possible pros and cons, possible repercussions, how different stakeholders would want to read this judgment, and what kind of implication it might have on cases which are about to kind of come into the stream, or they are sub judice, or even some of them have actually gone through a drill. So we also need to kind of see through our interaction, is there something which we could have done differently, right? Was there a fresh perspective required while checking applicability of a particular act, limitation act in this case? Did we really see a harmonious interpretation of laws when they really come face to face with each other while dealing with an issue? Are we really compromising, somewhere in terms of that, some particular statute has to have a lead and somebody will have to play a second fiddle? Are we really comparing apples to apples? And of course, once we make it interactive, we'll go a bit deeper because I have a set of queries, both ways. Does this judgment settles the dust really, or it raises further questions from some affected stakeholders? have we missed the woods for trees, as we normally want to see the bigger picture and also see the implication on the respective cases? Are we somewhere diluting the entire IBC's intent, right? Whether it's intentional, unintentional, knowingly, unknowingly, to our act, so on and so forth. So there'll be, set of queries. My suggestion would be, post we hear from Mr. Singh, his views, his remarks on how he feels, how he reads the judgment, then we'll try to put forth two set of queries. One will be specifically with regard to the judgment and the concept, what we have, as a part of the session. Second, I also have, certain collation of queries, including some suggestions, which speak about the evolving IBC space and the larger issues which are plaguing the system. So, we can take them one by one, but that's all after we hear, from Mr. Singh. So, I'll conclude my opening remarks here and over to Mr. Singh. Thank you.
Good evening to all of you. So I'm thankful to ICSI for inviting me for this session. I also thank Mr. Malhotra for giving me welcome kind of words, which partly I may deserve, partly I may not. But nevertheless, I will try to share what I perceive to be, what disclaimers, etc. I have to. I will start with the disclaimer first. Because sitting on the bench, what I am going to talk here is more or less for academic interest, people and dissemination of information, and not necessarily the viewpoint probably on the individual cases which come before us. Kindly bear it in mind that what we are talking here is academic system, academic repercussions, and probably impacts of it and the way forward. This is what probably I felt it. Now, I will just try to go a little bit on the background also. If you see the beginning of the IBC, it talks about the time-bound resolutions. You see, that is the starting point. If you look into the starting point, when we talk about the time-bound resolutions, it also means time is important. Law of limitation also talks about that what is the time within which you should actually start doing something. I mean, if you are continually sitting idle for too long, obviously you are missing the bus. I mean, I think probably the very concept of IBC itself is make the process shorter, make the process as fast as possible, make it as efficient as possible. I think probably we had initial controversies whether law of limitation applies or not, but the fact of the matter is this is a act which basically talks about lesser than the lesser. You see, if I put it the other way around, law of limitation gives you the maximum period within which you must start. But why I must continue to wait till the last day? That is one issue. I mean, that is what probably one great message which comes from the court decisions. That is, in case you have a problem, in case you are having a problem, try to resolve it as early as possible rather than waiting till the last time have available with us. Now, this is the setting in which probably the whole operations have come, but then the secondary things will come. Now, probably having made this point that it is implicit, law of limitation is implicit. We had the controversy whether it is applied or not applied, and that controversy probably Supreme Court also ultimately resolved it, that it is immaterial whether it was mentioned there or not mentioned. This is applicable. Then the amendment came and it also made a specific provision. Now the fact of the matter is that the law by very nature itself is for faster work, and faster work means as soon as possible. I mean, no, probably when you look into that part, but then there is a little bit of unhappiness also. Unhappiness is the law also came into being looking into this aspect that the existing systems do not have delivered results. And that is another aspect probably where the law has to tackle it. Because if we were very happy with the system which was working, then what was the necessity of a new law? If the new law will not take care of the cases which are already existing, what will happen to the intention? That means by necessity, if the law of limitation is applied very strictly, the problem will remain there, only future will take care. You see, now this is a two dilemma which we have been facing. Because the lot of things like we have been seeing that the total NPAs are more than say 10 trillion, it may be actually 20 trillions, and probably in the current senior environment, there may be much more to be added because the downturn in business has come, because there may be much more default. But actually the downturn which are going to come currently is not a very serious issue as far as this judgment is concerned. Because the defaults which take place these days or likely to take place or has taken place for a year or 3 years, there is not a problem. The problem is only when the judgment says that it is 3 years and no more. I think that creates a problem. Because I will be talking about the judgment, but this is only the setting part. You see, the two things come into mind. We are almost 3.5 years into the court. More than about 2,500 cases have been admitted also. I am doubtful if the limitation was not applied, how many of them, if we go by this principle, how many of them will become honest? And many of those cases, even resolution has taken place, resolution applicants have also taken place. And my only assumption is that the completed transactions will not be affected, because these things have already taken place. Now, the secondary stage is, am I not audible? So excuse me, am I not audible or something?
You are audible, sir.
We can hear you, sir. Please continue.
Okay, then. Now the question is that what happens now, the cases which are in transit, because there is two things which come to my mind. The first is, we said in Swiss ribbon, defaulters' paradise is lost. But if you look into this part, the defaulters, whichever they are there, whether this will restore the defaulters' paradise now. Because in case at the moment which are either pending or which probably in applications have been admitted, what will be the fate of it? This is one thing where probably strictly as per the judgment that only under Article 137 of the Limitation Act and the period provided for 3 years is to be followed strictly. That is what somewhere it is little bit giving a difficulty. I was looking into the Limitation Act, but it has been talked about it, but not very specifically. If we look into our section 2 and definition clause J, period of limitation. The period of means the period of limitation prescribed for any suit, appeal, or application by the schedule. The prescribed period means the period of limitation computed in accordance with the provisions of this act, which basically means, at least I perceive it, that the schedule has given the period, but all relaxations which the sections are providing have to be taken care of. It cannot be that the relaxations given by various sections are not to be allowed, because that is what the law is itself. Because even in the first case of BK Education also, it was specifically mentioned that apart from 137 3 years, the person can refer to section 5, that extension of period prescribed in certain cases can be held off. You see the progress law. At that point of time, section 5 was mentioned that in case you can make it a case under section 5, that period will make an extension of the period. But if you look like into our definition, it includes all sections. So it doesn't exclude other sections. I mean, that is the one point which I want to make it. It shall not make that other sections are excluded, but 5 is included. But it could be that it has been pleaded like that. But anyway, there has been a further progress. Over a period of time, we have done some cases also. We have given the benefit of section 14 also, which basically deals with the person has pursued it on the wrong forum. Now we can say so, the person has pursued his remedy in a wrong forum. To great extent, it may not be because IBC is a new act. If something has been pursued on a different forum, section 14 may not be readily be applicable. Okay. Now, then what leaves is actually section 18 only. That whether the admissions have taken place and they have to be taken care of it or they are not to be taken care of. I think the whole gamut comes down to section 18 only. Now, section 18 of the Limitation Act, we are a little bit in a very uncomfortable situation. We have both sides. One, where the books of accounts are whether they are being treated as admissions or they are not admissions, or whether there are a specific admission given by them. This is where probably I have a really some sort of reservations or probably the difference of opinion. What I will put it again in the perspective. I mean, if I put it in a perspective, probably for the understanding part. Before the company is brought into insolvency, anyway, let me say IBC chapter 2, part 2, it applies to only corporate world. It doesn't apply to other people. So any person which is triggering part 2 means corporate world. Till that day, it is regulated by the Companies Act. Because all corporate world is regulated by the Companies Act. Till date, when we bring it into from under the IBC. And probably let me recap also that in fact actually all existing applications under old section 433E, they were transferred to tribunals. That means it was taken out from the Company Act, it put into the tribunal. But that was put under IBC. The tribunal deals with obviously with company matters also, IBC matters also. Now the situation here is, there is a close connection between IBC and the Companies Act. We cannot disintegrate this connection. Now, if we look into this part, very interesting things are there. Now, when you look into the Companies Act, 2013 Act has made a great departures also from 1956. One of the greatest departures is change of forum, that NCLT, NCLT, etc. has come. I mean, the jurisdiction of High Court has been taken away. I mean, that itself has been a substantial change. Now, composition of the people who will constitute NCLT, NCLT, that also is different than what High Court used to have. Because it was all, High Court used to have only judicial people, but these tribunals have probably equality of judicial as well as technical people, which basically means something more can be looked into what we had been looking into earlier. I mean, that is what we must, I mean, that is what in fact in some of the judgment also we have recorded, that there is a little bit different composition of input expertise also in the NCLT and NCLT, which earlier existed in the High Courts. There is a little bit of different in expertise also. So probably that is also another change. Now another greater changes which has taken place, especially, now I am emphasizing on the accounting side. There are section 129, 130, 131, 132, 3, 4. They're all dealing with what kind of accounting will be there. What kind of things will be there. You see, 129 section will talk about, I mean, only I'm just repeating what is there. So 129 talks about the financial statement. I mean, I'm not dilating what the contents are, only the import of it into our IBC. 130, in fact, actually is very important section which has very little use, and 130 and 131. Surprisingly, these two sections are the new introduction. They didn't exist in 1956 Act. And this is on reopening of accounts on courts or tribunals orders. That is section 130. And then there is section 131, voluntary revision of financial statement or board reports. These actually didn't exist in 1956 Act. So there has been a paradigm shift even in this system. Now 133, Constitution of National, 132, Constitution of National Financial Reporting Authority. Then with this also didn't exist actually in the old method, or probably in a refined method it is change in forum also. And then 134, 133, central government to prescribe accounting standard. It existed, but it is almost the framework has been changed because national financial reporting has come. And similarly, financial statement, board reports, etc. etc. Now these are the few things which has come, which is new than it existed. I personally feel with this introduction, there has been enhancement of accountability and sanctity of the financial statement which is put in the public places. Because in case we have made the balance sheets or financial statements, they are having a more sanctity than they had before 2013 Act has come. Because some paradigm changes have come. Now one hypothetical thing can be there. I have prepared a balance sheet which is supposed to be according to the accounting standards, which is supposed to be, management has not taken a decision that it has to be reopened. That is it not final as far as management is concerned? Is it not final as far as management is concerned? Because here is, if the management doesn't consider it final, it has to take a decision to reopen. And in case they do not take a decision to reopen, and if they take a decision also to reopen, they have to satisfy the tribunal also the need for reopening, validity for reopening, and probably propriety of reopening also. You see, now that is what is one part. And a secondary issue, which probably another part which will come is that though which has been dealt with, that balance, that financial statements are mandatorily to be prepared every year. But every year, assumptions of making a balance sheet, decisions taken on the balance sheets, qualitative aspect reviewed in the financial statement, they have to be reviewed every year. Though law has mandated that financial statement has to be prepared every year, law gives that discretion to the management that what your assumptions and presumptions are there or your assertions are there, that should be reflected into the statement, and in case it is not there, as far as you are concerned, this is final. I think probably this is one aspect which I find normally is missing now, because this neither there is any discussion over these areas, either probably it has been pleaded before the courts, and if it has not been pleaded before the court, suo motu, probably somebody has not scanned into it or probably not reflected into it. I mean, I am only finding that this is a gray area which is not discussed into the judgment. They have discussed only the mandatory filing, mandatory annual, but they have not filing that the content of it and departure from the content, it has a major consequences, because it has a consequences for the management, it has a consequences for the auditors, because there is a mechanism to enforce these non-compliances also. Now, looking into this aspect, I personally feel there is still a gray area to be decided. I mean, that is what I do not want to judge it. What will be the fate of things to come? But what I only wanted to bring it on the fore, that this gray area neither have been discussed either by the tribunals, nor by our appellate tribunal, nor by the Supreme Court, that the change scenario and sanctity, which probably we earlier have a decision, some decision talking about it, that financial statement or balance sheet will be taken as a proof. Some will say it will not be taken. I mean, there is a confusion. Probably under the new law and in the new scenario, new situation, that there is a need to comprehensive look into all this kind of thing. And then one very interesting thing which comes to my notice. I mean, I will share with you see what happened. Even existing explanations under Section 18 of the Limitation Act. If the debtor gives in writing to somebody that, okay, I have the loan to pay you, this is valid ground for actually extending the limit. Now the problem here is, I may give these certificates to 400 people because I may be having 400 my creditors, both financial, operational, everybody. If I sign 400 certificates, they are valid. But I have a reasonable doubt on the efficiency of the system. But here is very senior people, group people together, the top management, including all this, whatever is owed to those people. And that is signed by the top. Not only one, number of people sign it. Whereas probably the lower category, that is the individual certificate, can be given by any authorized person of the corporation also, which could be somebody who is dealing with accounts, somebody who is saying we confirm your balances. I think probably the system, if you look at a system, now 400, 1000 certificate can be given. They will be all valid, but consolidated certificate given on all the things, that is not to be looked into and that is not valid. I mean, this is a contradiction. And I know from our experience in courts, when the individual certificate, there are litigations. Somebody says competent authority has not signed it. Somebody says authorized person have not signed it. Somebody says I have not received it. Somebody says reconciliation not made. I mean, all that kind of things are there. Looking into the system efficiency which we intend to improve, and I have no doubt IBC is a part of the process of improving efficiency. IBC is a part of the process of improving efficiency, that we cannot ignore the pointers which are pointing to improving the efficiency, which will help improvement in system. If I put it slightly other way, insolvency and bankruptcy, it is an extraordinary measure to inject better corporate governance into the corporate world. Because where earlier we have taken it for granted that the existing management have entrenched right to be into the corporate, IBC has brought a paradigm change. You are entrenched till you are efficient. Efficiency means you are honoring your all obligations. You are able to manage the things in a manner that the third party interests are not compromised. The issue is, as soon as the third party interests are compromised, your right to continue to be entrenched is in doubt. And if I put it the IBC into this, I mean, if I put into the IBC into the second phase of the company management, first management, you are doing all well, you have your all freedom, but obviously regulated, keep doing it, nobody, and probably we have done a lot to rationalize that system. What we find is where you trip. When you trip it, you come into insolvency. And what we envisage, this is a very short period, say about a year or so. I mean, I'm only making a point, not very. If for about a year or so, you are being given this treatment, and this treatment is, if you restore back, as soon as resolution applicant take over or somebody takes it over, it goes back to the corporate world again. Anyway, it can be taken over by non-corporate world. I have no problem with that, because resolution applicant not necessarily to be the corporate world. He can be somebody else also. But in case the resolution applicant which comes here, he is in the corporate world, again the company will go into the company act. And that is what it is, a treatment to be given so that disease is taken care of. As soon as the normalcy is restored, again it is business as usual. I think this is what the phrases I believe is something like this. Now, coming into the part where probably is our concern today now, that if you can't trigger this part, second part, and what I am having a very strange situation which I want to bring forth. If I had my default, which was more than earlier, because my presumption is, and in fact, that is what the cases that come from financial creditors, I must say so. I am not so sure about the operational creditor. There is no financial creditor. Normally, he will not avail of the law of limitation which is existed as on that day. If he has to file a suit, he will do it within the limitation period. Now, having filed those suits or everything else, since the process was not faster enough number of years have passed by. I would have been happy, and probably I still feel it, if those processes are faster, probably IBC was not needed. Because that was, if the process was faster, within a limitation somebody has done it, within a reasonable period, you can call it a year or two, because IBC is talking about 1 year or so. That when you come into this process, within a year or so, whether you will be healthy or ongoing should be decided within a year or so. And in case you cannot be restored back to health, then probably you go outside, something like liquidation and all. That means you are not restored back to the companies. So you are only out. But no happens is if I trigger, I am saying what I am saying is by and large, I have not seen financial creditors by and large, our bankers or NBFCs, they have availed it of the opportunities they had. Now, obviously, if the Supreme Court has given a decision, but it is giving a little bit very strange problem. I had a huge amount of debt which I am fighting in the courts. Let's suppose already under DRT, SURFICE, etc., etc. I am fighting. There is a small default which somebody else has taken place. Because companies do not go into default only on one issue. If it has a tendency, it might end up into a default of somebody else also. If it ends into a default of somebody else, no, somebody else trigger this insolvency. When he triggers insolvency, all my existing cases go to moratorium. That's the problem. All the people who cannot trigger insolvency, but somebody else triggers this, even though validly their cases are lying in the DRT, SURFICE everywhere, they all get covered into the moratorium. So the people are nowhere now. And I have seen, that is what probably I was a little bit more worried. We have seen the cases. Now somebody else has triggered it. Now these people have to file their claims also. No, because their claims are not barred. Now we say that they are barred only from one solvency, but they are not barred for the claim because the claims assist because during their limitation period they have moved the forum. If you have moved the forum during the limitation period for recovery itself, their claims are admitted into the insolvency also, not triggered by me but by somebody else. Now this is a little bit dichotomous situation. Now the claims are not settled yet. We have seen some resolution applications which has come, claims which has come, some not admitted, some disputed, something has happened. Now what really happens? Resolution applicant decides within a year, moratorium has taken place, no authoritative decision takes place during this period. During the moratorium period, all cases which are lying in various fora, they are not decided. And resolution applicant says, I do not know what will be the fate of these cases. I do not take this responsibility. I have to take it from clean slate. Now the people who have gone to the fora in this IBC, they are actually losing it out unless there is a determination of the claims. I have seen resolution professionals saying, since there is no determination, I am not sure whether I will take it as a claim or I will not take it as a claim. Because once this is a dispute and not settled, it has a more or less contingency. Now, into that kind of situation, I was a little bit appalled. I saw into some of the cases where a claim worth 200 crore rupees are not even to consider because they are lying under various foras. But then there is a resolution plan which is coming. The resolution applicant after this will take over with a clean slate. And the people who are into the cases, they stand nowhere. Neither their cases are getting decided, nor their claims are admitted. Even if the claims are not admitted, then probably you have to decide, and where do you go? I think probably this is what an area, probably gray area, that the claims which exist legally, though they may be not finality of the words, that how much is due, how much is not due, and probably that gray area, barring them that you cannot come into because their claims are more than 4 years old, 5 years old. Because we know notoriously that all of our forums have not been so efficient that in a short place of time they have been able to decide. But since they had not been able to decide, I think this gray area probably still required to be taken care of. I mean, this is what is what. Now, this is what now probably the setting and the judgment which has come. I'm not having a much dispute because it continues in the line of thinking from the Supreme Court. Starting from BK education, then going further. The issue they have been demanding is only if the forum exists, but the forum exists are the old forums only. You see, the problem dilemma is here. That the fundamental problem which triggered this IBC, we are actually telling them you continue with the old forum only. So how do we tackle this 10 trillion NPA or bad debt or probably potential bad debt or something? I mean, this is what is an area of concern to me, or probably I want the people to be sensitized that the implication of this decision, which is not the first one, it is actually in the series. But since now it has come in a series, it has been quite a comprehensive. It did talk about, it did talk about the genesis. What is happening is probably over a period of time, I have a problem. Are we losing? I'm saying is, are we losing the stain that IBC will become a tool which didn't deliver? That is the problem which actually I am saying as a dilemma. Because the future, which we can call it, after IBC come, the corporate governance has become more stricter, norms have become more stricter, bankers have become more stricter. Future is being taken care of that probably, and at the earliest opportunity of the debt and default, new loans, etc. will get covered into this one. But the old system, old loans, whatever they are valid. Now, in this sense is once the action has started during the limitation period. Now the problem is, isn't it? Because in case somebody has not done it during the limitation period, I think that it is nobody's case that either under the old system or under the new system that will be taken up. That is what precisely happened. Our insolvency committee, which has been talking about it, the old cases of sanctions of 2019-99. Unless you have progressed, unless you have gone to some forum within the limitation period, you cannot come here. Because otherwise the debt is totally lost. The enforcement is lost. Because somebody has defaulted in 2001 or let's say 2010. If he has not moved any forum till 2013, in any case he cannot continue further. 2013 or whatever the limitation respective depending on the transaction will be there. But if having moved the forum, it cannot be said that it is totally barred. It is not been determined whether finality has not been granted. You see, finality has not been granted. I cannot say they are barred. In case, because like I may say so, the cases which came from high courts, obviously when the cases were instituted in a court, the limitation could have been the matter to be decided first. If that has been progress further and the limitation either not pleaded or not claimed or not done, obviously those only the cases came here. So obviously they have to be processed accordingly. So here, that is what probably we need to relook into that the cases where the need to resolve is there, it has been resolved because, and one thing what we are missing, again, one thing which is very important we are missing. We also believe that insolvency resolution is not adversarial. This is what Supreme Court has said it too many times. It is not adversarial. Here is a matter is a collective action. And in fact, actually, let me make it very frank. I do not believe it is not a recovery mechanism. It is collective recovery and resolution mechanism. In fact, actually, the real is this one. Recovery mechanism also, which we say only if one party has gone to the court, they will continue to proceed in the court. That is one individual recovery mechanism. But this is also recovery it is collective recovery and resolution mechanism. I think probably we are missing the word, it is collective also. Because ultimately, if we really see so under resolution plan also, whatever we realize is it is distributed to all the people together under the law and the whatever the waterfall mechanism of what the law has provided, isn't it? So the recovery is also regulated accordingly. It's only now the question to me from efficiency point of view. Collective, market-driven, transparent, under a framework system is one side. Individual actions, maybe if you see so, put all people together, operational creditor, financial creditor, a company may be facing 50 cases, 100 cases in the various court for recovery, something. But here it will be one forum, take a collective decision. If you are able to go ahead and the fast process. I think probably this is what a setting in which probably I feel that the decisions on limitation probably may need a relook, and in case it is not a relook by the judiciary, probably IBBI or the government may have to look into so that it delivers. And if it doesn't deliver what we intended to, probably our efforts will be half-baked only, half taken forward, and half achieved only. I think I wish otherwise that we achieve better, we strive for better, and message to the people who are listening, you have to also look into how the system efficiency will have to be improved, because our practitioner either company secretary or lawyer or somebody, our inherent welfare is in efficiency of the process of the government or the law. Let's look into more the process, better the processes, faster the processes, better we are. I think this is the aspect which I wanted. As far as the individual aspects are concerned, I will leave it to you. Ask the questions from the people, and we will make clarifications point wise as is possible. And I feel that the other people who are on the stage, they can also make contribution. I do not hold monopoly of anything, neither monopoly of knowledge. I am very small, very little knowing person. Thank you very much.
Great, sir. So nice. Thank you. Yes,
Sanjeevji, just a minute. Sanjeevji, just a minute. Yeah. Well, sir, Balwinder Singh ji, I think I was really mesmerized the way you presented the issue, as well as the issues which still remain to be answered, and whether the objective of the IBC can be achieved if the law is not interpreted in the spirit in which the parliamentarians have enacted this law. I think you have raised a very, very valid point. And while raising these points, I think it is a joint wisdom of your and your experience of having worked in the audit and accounts department and dealt with the accounting part of it, and the changes which have come into the accounting part of it, I think are equally important, and the kind of weightage which should be given to it while deciding the legal issues, I think is a very, very important point which you have made, and which has given us really a food for thought. Yes, so far as judgment of the Supreme Court is concerned, It is the law of the land. It is binding on us, and we are supposed to follow it until the legislatures takes a note of it and they want to bring a change in it to take care of the situation which is prevailing prior to coming into the law into force. Or the Supreme Court itself, somebody approaches the Supreme Court, makes an application, and a larger bench takes a different view under the same law, under the same circumstances. So till then, we have to follow it. So thank you very much, sir. I think it was a very, very enlightening discussion. And I think all the participants were very much, will be interested in asking many questions. And on behalf of ICSI IIP, I thank you for sparing time and sharing your thoughts and views on this important issues, some of the issues which have arisen out of this judgment. And you have rightly said, this is not the first judgment. This has also followed the law laid down in the earlier judgments, no doubt about it. But then, in spite of that, there are certain issues which are still not settled and probably call for a further deliberation and a further authority from the apex court, for which we are looking either from the apex court or from the legislature. So I just convey my thanks for sparing time and giving us a food for thought. Sanjeev ji, over to you for your valuable contribution as well as for the issues that may be coming before us.
Thank you, sir. And thank you, Mr. Singh. That was amazing. Frankly, I'm at total loss because, I had collected so many queries and I was putting them in a format so that, we can go one by one. But believe me, after hearing you, I think you've touched upon on each and every bit of it. So the only option which I'm left with is I'll go through these queries one by one, because it'll be summing up what the queries are and what are the related issues. If you think there is something else to add, probably we'll wait. Otherwise, I'll move to the next query. Now, the first set of queries which I have are more on the topic as well as on the concept. And after we are done, sir, I'll take maybe just 5 minutes for some queries on the larger issues. So I'll probably get started with your permission. So first was, did we for once went into too much of technical and strict interpretation of a particular law over a harmonious interpretation, what we keep talking about, while we dealt with this particular issue. And of course, it started from BK Educational and went through so many judgments. But somewhere, as we have all been given to understand, the application of Limitation Act normally means the right remains, but the judicial remedy is gone. Right, sir? Now the beauty is IBC says the company itself will go. Right. So limitation says your right is gone, right is there, but judicial remedy gone. IBC probably says if things don't work out the way they need to, the company itself will be dissolved, it will be gone. Now, in this context, how much is relevant to really keep both these statutes at the same, parallel level? So that is something which is plaguing, a lot of minds. And also what we are saying is, if it's liquidation, yes, the company gets dissolved. And if it's the CIRP, we have 32A and a resolution applicant expects a clean slate. So in that scenario, what exactly will happen? So over to you.
Now, you see, let me just touch upon this issue and probably one more issue also. A related issue.
Sure.
Let me see, because this has been debated also, that resolution word is used in the preamble. Right. No liquidation is used. I will put it more harmoniously. Liquidation also is a part of the resolution.
Agreed,
because
sir.
resolution only has 2 phases.
Absolutely.
See, I will put it in the 3 ways. Again, only in a context, and then we go for that.
Sure.
The first context is if the first existing management is into the business, it has assets, it has liabilities, it is not able to meet its liability. That is a phase. Now, second phase is, or IBC phase. IBC phase is company is in one kind of business. Some management was running it. We want to explore the possibility whether alternative management can continue to run the same efficiently.
Agreed.
That is the resolution phase, what we are really talking about.
Sure.
The second phase is if nobody else is also able to run it now. Now, what we call it liquidation, I have been saying so. Liquidation is not a dirty word. It is a different objective. Assets which these corporations are owning, which are national assets, they must be put to alternative use now. The liquidation is actually putting into alternative use. It is again the resources must be used. They shall not get stuck where they are not operating. Because if we were operating, we want an alternative to operate, but alternative is not available. But then idle assets must be given to somebody else so that he can put to alternative use. So to me, broader perspective, resolution actually includes both.
It does.
Because it is in the national interest, economy. I mean, that's what we say.
Sure.
Credit, economy. I mean, that is what both the perspective. I think probably in that way, let me demystify. I believe liquidation is also a resolution. Liquidation is a default rule that in case you are not able to come up with any alternative manager, then it is any outside world will come into. Because it will not be the same line of business. Any business you can put to the assets. I think this is what I put. Now, what you said is, now how do we resolve it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, the resolution, I will again go back. Resolution is the difference between the previous one, the current one. It is a market driven now. You see, our old methods of settling, either OTS or, you see, all those were, we do not know, and why OTS was not taking place. Let me say something like that. Nobody really knows what is an appropriate manner, what is an appropriate level which is sustainable. And if appropriate level is decided between the two parties, one wanting more, one trying to pay less, but there is no who is doing intermediation. No, intermediation has to come from market resources. Earlier, if it is done either by tribunal, either by court, either by somebody, that is not what the market will bear it. That is how we have seen it one after another. Sika, you operate, do something, again it fails. You do some ODS, if it is again not actually the market driven, what will happen? After another 2-3 years, again it going to either somebody will profit or somebody will lose. But the optimum level where both sides match, that was not achieving. No, probably this resolution, open bids, open mechanism, transparency, third party to manage the affairs, consultative process on something like that. So this is what efficiency is. Efficiency is not. So probably the option to continue with the system which was inefficient, I will not really recommend, because the progress of society is to build more efficiency. Progress of the country is to have more efficiency.
Right.
No, with this spirit only, no, what you say, I mean, in the sense that these dilemmas will always be there. Because even what is more efficient is also in the perspective only. Isn't it? Something is efficient today, it may not be efficient tomorrow. Something was efficient yesterday, it may not be today, or it may not be tomorrow. So probably what I am trying to say is, you see, and then the Supreme Court says, we can't stop experimenting. You see, we can't stop experimenting also. We have to keep experimenting, and in those experimenting, the spirit is that let's try to do better. And whatever ways, I will not stand on, I mean, probably Mr. Malhotra ji touched it, which is actually very close to my heart, what he said. I always believe Parliament meets once in a while. It lays down the objective, it lays down the framework. The duties cast on the adjudicating authority or the ministry or somebody how to deliver it. Because Parliament doesn't sit and give you guidance every day. It has made a law. It is mandate both for the judiciary as for our executive. Because they are giving you, we want this thing to done. To deliver it is our efficiency principle. Whether we deliver it in efficiency or whether we deliver it in inefficiency, it will go by again reiteration. If the country is not happy, Parliament will have to make again intervention. Parliament makes a broader intervention, gives sufficient power, give powers to the judiciary also, isn't it? All laws are saying something. Of course, we have constitution, everything, okay. But the framework of the law is there. Objective to be delivered by parliament, it is actually will of the people.
Great.
Now the delivery is to be done by executive and judiciary board. They may harmonize, they will have to look into, but by and large, judiciary being independent doesn't go into the nitty-gritty. Proactive approach has to come from the executive. If something is happening, either we go for curative or some other alternative, or probably we put our difficulty to the parliament. This is something, and that's what I'm happy. We had done that quite efficiently in the last 3 years. 3 times amendments have come, more may come. So some, yeah. So
Correct, sir.
I think probably that will. I mean, I'm only giving the perspective because one thing I tell you, I'm not
Yeah.
referring to individual cases because my perspective is not to teach the persons one case, but the spectrum of it.
Correct. Great, sir. So essentially, if I were to kind of sum up, judicial remedy having been taken away by the application of Limitation Act,
Yeah.
and in a very unfortunate circumstances, a corporate debtor itself dies its own death because of liquidation, right? The rights which are still there with that lender apparently have, no light at the end of the tunnel. So that's like, only one area which kind of, continues to be a gray area, as you said.
Yeah,
So
true.
somebody will have to really kind of, go deeper to.
I mean, I will
the
just
solution.
no, I will just make only small intervention
Ji.
because we started with protected from its people, but here you see from his own management. But here probably this is again putting the management back there
Okay.
because you see that is the contradiction which is coming.
Right.
Because we started with it, corporate debtor is different from the promoter or the management, isn't
Sure.
it? The
Yeah.
stakeholders are larger than others.
Absolutely.
So the larger than others, but probably this puts it back into it. So probably we are going into the half semicircle, if not the full circle.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Something like
Correct. Great, sir. So I'll move to the next one. Now,
Yeah.
a 3-year rule, as has been spoken many times under Article 137, if it applies on petition, and then taking a cue from here, a lot of RPs also are in a dilemma that they also will have to continue rejecting the claims, right, which are time barred. Now,
Yeah.
are we saying that the government, when it came out with IBC on 1st of December 2016, they only intended to clear the NPAs in the books of the banks only for last 3 years? If that be the case, then the entire NPA space, as you said in your remarks, of so many thousands and lakhs of crores, that means that was not the addressable market. The market in any case was only for the last 3 years, if that be the case.
No,
And you also said, and rightly so, that it's not necessary that the same lender or a bank is able to kind of really initiate a CRP. It can very well happen through another Section 7 or a Section 9 application, right? It can be an employee, it can be a workman, whatever it might be. Now, the moment the company goes into CRP, but that particular bank has an NPA which was more than 3 years old. Now he was debarred from initiating a CRP. He's debarred from making a claim. Where does it lead?
He's not debarred from making a claim. He will be able to make a claim. But the problem is that the court didn't decide anything.
Agreed.
Because I am saying is because which probably I'm again interacting. If they were barred in the first stage, no chance. Because if they have not started existing remedial measures, they have started existing remedial measures. Because existing remedial measures mean recovery mechanisms.
Right.
If they have already triggered it, because if you have not triggered the recovery mechanism during the limitation period, you are actually out. I mean, we can't help it, isn't it? But you have already done this, because that is what my experience with the bankers have been now, that they have started it. Because either you will ask for the OTS scheme, they were doing CDS, that CDR scheme. I mean, something has been started, what was existing.
Whatever was available. Agree.
What was available? Look,
Right.
they can't anticipate that the act will come and then will start. But if they have not started, then they are out actually. If they have not started with the limitation of those defaults. But having started the process, their actually claims are not out. I'm only saying is the forums have not decided. They have been put under moratorium not to decide. When resolution application comes, so we have a problem
Agreed. Right.
because they are not
Sir,
decided.
absolutely. So this
Yeah.
this statement of yours, would it now, because of the judgment we have with us, would it
Yeah.
apply as a bar to the lender, to a financial creditor, to a bank regarding his NPA, only with respect to the petition and not with respect to the claim? Are we saying this?
So it will not because our IBC says even disputed claim they have to file. They can. You see, that is not a problem there. Now
Right.
determination is a problem because RP has no power to determine it. He has
Agreed.
to only see the documents and all.
Right.
But who can determine? They are barred to determine it also.
Yeah.
This is a problem. I'm looking into from that aspect.
Agreed, sir.
RP will not decide. He will collate. He will collect, and he says it is there or it is not there. Okay. But if he says I'm unable to decide, but the forum already has been moved to decide, but they are in moratorium,
That is
so it
true.
is not getting decided.
Yes, sir. Now, as a practicing IP, frankly, it's slightly off tangent, but I would really want to kind of, make this issue very apparent here. What happens is, yes, in Swiss Ribbons, in SR Steel, we have time and again heard that the resolution professional per se does not have, the adequate power or authority to
Yeah.
really accept or reject. So all he has to do is collate. Now, sir, the problem is you get a particular claim and you are not in a position to kind of accept. Now the opposite of accept is reject. Either somebody will have to keep going to adjudicating authority, which also increases the litigation, or the load. The other point is, if we accept, I mean, frankly, I'm not saying accept, but even if I take, I collate and verify to the extent I can, I put it on the list. What will happen is I'm giving a certain scenario, certain expectation to the resolution applicant. Now, that information memorandum actually is the very basis of a potential resolution applicant to agree, get excited to pick up the company or provide a plan or not. Now, if my claims are not real, now real in the sense whether if they've not been properly verified, and whether it's because of my laxity or because of the system flaw, the resolution applicant is actually putting his entire effort of deciding whether to move ahead on that particular information memorandum. Now that is dangerous, because what will happen, sir, if the claimant goes to adjudicating authority and waits for the approval of determination of the amount, my resolution applicant is actually kept hanging in the interim, and that is not a healthy sign, especially in today's context or otherwise, where the resolution applicant is a white knight. I need to be really mindful of him. I need to be really thinking about him, because he is a sect. He's a representative of a section which really helps me to provide a resolution of a distress asset. So how would you take it like?
No, I am only trying to make a point that this is a gray area which needs more clarifications now. You see, by and large. I mean, issue is that this is a gray area. There is another aspect only which I will just mention. You see, when there is a information memoranda and there is some doubt on information, because it is not only the information memoranda, but when probably you discuss and some people raise the issues, whenever there is an uncertainty, resolution applicant is going to take into consideration, bidding will come down. It will actually harm our maximization. You see, the more certain the information, the more deterministic will be the bids. More gray the information, it will be discounted as a uncertainty mechanism.
Agreed.
You see what happened? That is what I mean. The dilemma is what you made a point earlier. I do not want that resolution applicant is actually burdened with too many left luggage.
Absolutely.
Isn't it? He has to start with a clean slate. He cannot carry on the whole of the left luggage. But what I am trying to make a point is, probably even if you see the yesterday Supreme Court, they are talking about AGR. What happens to the telecom companies now?
Right.
Because there everybody knows it. If the government revenue will be at the bottom, all AGR have to be written off. I mean, you can take it under the resolution plan, because they will be a operational creditor. and our waterfall mechanism, they are almost behind everybody, you can practically say so, practically getting nothing. But
Agreed.
you see, so anyway, that is why the gray areas are coming.
Agreed. Point
I
taken.
mean, if it is a small amount, I mean, I can put it. If it is a
Yeah.
small amount, maybe one I can put it only from the practical point of view. 1, 2, 3, 4% can be contingency also. I mean, okay, resolution applicant can say, okay, I will distribute this much, I will take another 5% or something like that. Or probably,
Agreed.
this is my firm bid, I will distribute less 5%, rest 5% I will keep it for contingency. Probably something can be done like that. Isn't it?
Right.
Some
Right.
margin of contingency can be kept in the process also.
Sure.
But probably too huge, because in the sense is like I'm just making a point, AGR method. If AGR itself is more than the whole asset, what will happen?
Agreed.
What is the contingency? Acha, now, in that situation, the person who will bid, what he will do? He will say, it is not viable, I am not coming. Either many people will not come, if there is too much uncertainty, and if somebody will come, he will discount it heavily. So
Agreed.
our maximization will go for a toss.
Absolutely.
So
Great.
probably that is, I mean, that is what I am trying to make.
Got it,
So,
sir.
Sanjeev, if we have questions from some of the participants, probably one or two questions. So, because we have time limitation, one or two questions we can take.
So I was like, parallelly going through prior, and some of them I already had incorporated. So
Please.
it's like a summation of most of them,
Good.
right? And so, sir, you've already touched upon the continued cause of action, which is the accepted concept, because whether it's SARFAESI or applying to DRT, whatever, showing the bona fide effort from the lender, depending on the options they had. So if they've continued with it, I think that's like, well taken thing. And so even that needs to be kind of given proper weightage, because to the extent you have an option. So whenever an IBC actually came as an option, prior to that, if they have been to DRT, they were issuing notice under SARFAESI, all those things have to be taken cognizance of. And only then, one can say that, yes, you have not, there is a gap of more than 3 years or something, which probably, where the limitation actually should actually bar. So that point well taken, already covered. You've already kind of, touched on the acknowledgement of debt, which is part of the balance sheet. And very rightly, sir, you gave the right example where if somebody is expecting 300, 400 certificates to each and every lender, creditor, now that's not going to be a practical solution. And it's also going to dilute the very relevance and the efficacy of a balance sheet, which is an audited document, which is signed by the management, who's a part of team, who's really responsible for this entire show, and also auditor, which is a third party. So if we can't rely on that, then I think we are really kind of making, somewhere it's diluting the very relevance of this entire process. And you were right that Companies Act actually regulates the company till the time it's not pushed to CRP. So that point again has been already taken care of. The other point was that somewhere in the judgment we also get to read the attempt by the corporate debtor to seek a OTS in application was also not given due weightage, because that happened as late as 2018. Right. So the very fact that a corporate debtor will reach out to a financial creditor for OTS is because he knows that there is a debt for which he needs to kind of find a solution. So any comments that you would want to make, because that's not been really taken up and given the weightage which it should have been.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I agree with you, because you see the very fact that, I mean, little bit more perspective. You see, the perspective is the very fact the OTS is there, the need for resolution is there. You see the problem?
Yeah.
If somebody is going for OTS or any other alternative, because at one point in time, RBI has withdrawn all these schemes. You see, because they also felt that this mechanism CIRP will be better, because it is a market driven. That's what I was mentioning it. Because you see why the bankers are also not very happy with OTS, because allegations of underdeal meetings and all. No, because you see, irrespective of anything, it is very easy to allege anything. But here in the transport system, it is not the allegation. Allegations are taken care of. The market will determine the price. Sustainable debt, what can be sustainable, what cannot be sustainable. It's the market will do it, isn't it? Because somebody should be arm's length approach, that is what 29A, isn't it?
Yeah.
By somebody
Yeah,
who is at arm's length approach, he is giving me the best price. I'm asking everybody to come, whosoever within the courts is eligible, isn't it? And the best, if he gives me, and then there are no allegations, it is underpriced or overpriced. You see the problem with ODS and other things. Because
absolutely.
it can be, but it is a negotiation between the two. But the third
Yeah.
party makes allegations then. I think this is a transfer ban. I thought probably that should be, that is what probably, if I add something which probably people will add. You see, when we start our debt and default, I will give one example which probably, it is something like a temperature to you. You go to a doctor. CIRPF is actually giving you the medicine what is appropriate to your health. And health is restored, you are back. So trigger point is not the reason. Trigger point, we have identified something. Okay, you have started defaulting and making payment to the people. Some threshold has been given because we don't want to put it something like that. So this is actually some temperature has started coming to the corporation that they are failing to honor some of their commitments.
Agreed.
If it is one of the item only, 12A has taken care of it. Okay, if one of the item is somebody, because the law says if one payment or one above the threshold you have failed to do it, then take the medicine, isn't it? But
Got
the
it.
person can say, so I don't require a medicine at the moment. Okay, I have sufficient resources, and if I
Yeah.
have sufficient resources, I have done it. So probably 12 has taken care of that part. But if the medicine has to be given, medicine has to be given by market forces.
Got it. Absolutely. Great, sir. So then I just picked up a couple of more queries. One is, as far as the assignment of debt by the lenders to institutions like ARC and all, it will now come under a kind of a cloud because if the bank has not been doing what it was supposed to, then immediately a ARC will be very wary of the fact that if we pick it up tomorrow, if we don't have an option to go under Section 7, this entire market probably will have a certain implication, and people will really have to kind of dig further into it, what the bank has been doing in the interim. So the connected query was, where does it leave the current sub judice cases or where the CRPs are going on? Because at the end, when they have annulled through the judgment a particular case, are we saying that the rest of the people might come to adjudicating authority or to appellate to you, stating that why are we being victimized if there is a judgment which clarifies a certain position? So I mean, your take, sir, on this.
No, my take is, in case it is a serious problem for many, then the because role of your association comes, role of trade association comes, the
Yeah.
problem has to be brought up on the face of it and addressed to the appropriate places. Appropriate places, I will put it, something which has to be brought to either through the notice of IBPI or to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, who are administering this law. You see, that is what probably when we are making it, I'm saying is, what I am talking to you, I may not be able to write. Okay? Isn't it? Because the
Agreed.
judgment we have to give it under our discipline.
Sure.
That is our discipline. But as a interested party in the country, as an interested party in the welfare and efficiency of the country, we are sharing something of some of our thought, which is also our experience, which we are disseminating, which may trigger the people to do some action on. I mean, purpose of mine is this only. That is why I interacted.
Got
That
it.
if you
Got it.
have a gray area, it is not I will raise it. There are appropriate people, appropriate forums to raise it.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Great.
Yes.
I think Sanjeevji earlier also, I think it was rightly pointed out by Shri Balwinder Singh ji that obviously there is a gray area. I think the appropriate forum is either the regulator who can issue certain rules in exercise of the power given to it under the Act, or the central government can frame rules in case central government is competent, has got that power. And if there is a deficiency in the principal legislation itself, it is for the parliament to look into the legislation and take corrective measures. Otherwise, I mean, normally we find that, Sir Balwinder Singh ji, I would say that normally I find that we have a very vibrant judiciary. And most of the time, whenever a crisis has come, the law has been interpreted more particularly by the apex court to carry out the intention and objective laid down under the constitution, that is the welfare of the society, more particularly the objective laid down as given in the preamble of the constitution. But maybe in certain cases, there are certain judgments which are given in facts and circumstances of the case, and certain observations are made, and those observations sometimes give rise to certain more issues, and probably that need to be sorted out. I think it is that kind of situation probably which we are dealing with, and remedy available is either for the legislature to take corrective measures, or maybe some people again approaching the court, and maybe a larger bench of the Supreme Court gives a different kind of direction, or further supplement the judgment which they have already given, clarifying certain points which are being in today's discussion. Sanjeev ji, over to you.
Right, sir. So, Mr. Singh, with your permission, I just have brought 3 or 4 queries. So I think we may not take more than 10 odd minutes. So with your permission, right? I mean, okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So, sir, a small specific observation I had. So when I went through the judgment, now a couple of statements, which Supreme Court has delivered in different judgments, there was a repetition of that. And what happens over the period, we literally pick it up and try and generalize it. Now there are 2 such kind of things which I'll just kind of speak on, and then we really need to see whether they should be only used in a context, or we really are doing justice by generalizing it. 1, revival and continuation of a corporate debtor by protecting corporate debtor from its own management. Now this was a statement made, observation made in a SR ruling. Now to me, this is very specific, right? I mean, they've heard specific arguments, they've gone through specific facts. There were legal counsels trying their best to prove each other right. I mean, themselves right. So in that drive, in that discussion, this statement came. We cannot generalize. We are not saying that every management needs every corporate debtor needs to be protected from its management. Otherwise, this entire MSME play, or we are making a big presumption that anyone who comes into CRB actually comes with a malified intent. So the only resolution possible is by having a change in the management. May or may not be true. So would you, sir, agree? I mean, that these statements should not be picked up so loosely and applied anywhere else like this?
Oh, let me say something.
Ji.
What is import of section 29A? Now you see the problem here.
Ji.
We had raised this into the legal principle, because 29A means, and we have taken it out, MSME out of 29A. Isn't it?
Right.
We are trying to fine tune out of it.
Yeah.
Now, I am not very sure, but I do expect if the first phase or slightly more longer phase goes up, we might dilute 29A further. Isn't it? I mean, I'm saying is probably 29A is brought into by amendment as a principle.
Agree.
It could be the experience which was limited at that time, and probably obviously then we have diluted it. Similarly, we brought 12A also. We brought 12A also, that this is another mechanism where you can continue, but do something. And probably if I put it there, if you see the 12A, we put it 90%. I always look into the Companies Act. It is almost like 233 section. There also provision is 90%. That you get your approvals and all through RT and not through the NCLT. So it is something where there is much more overwhelming majority to do something. Probably court supervision may not be necessary.
Right.
Something like that. I mean, I look at it from that perspective.
Agreed.
Okay, something like that. So we had tried to dilute it also. 29A was brought, then 12A is brought, then 238. I mean, that we have brought again MSME out, and probably some rules are coming. You never know, more things will also come out. I mean,
Absolutely.
then probably the problem is that probably if you keep narrowing it down, and then probably the rule can be converted also. I mean, I am saying is, if the rules are lined out, 90% are out, then probably the rule will be different.
Yeah.
We made it 100% this way, diluted it. If 50-60% is diluted, maybe need to dilute it further. But if it is followed in the market as a deterrence, or probably even it could be something like that, in case some examination has taken place, management has not been found to be fit, there could be something like that determination also can come, and they can be allowed to be, I mean, in case there are no transactions I-43, etc., no this kind of transactions are found during the CIRB, then we can probably remove, or probably court-driven order that
Yeah.
probably 28 may be held in abeyance in appropriate cases. I mean, I think those are the possibility which might come.
Got it, sir.
Sir, sir, may I supplement what you have said? Because with reference to the point raised by Sanjeev with regard to the observations made by the courts here and there by passing a judgment, I think the view as a student of law, which I have to say is, many a time these statements are picked up and quoted before the tribunal or maybe before other forums, more particularly picking it up from the Supreme Court judgment, which may not be the ratio of the case. So I think we always have to look, if that issue was substantially before the court and the court has given a direct decision on that, then that becomes the ratio and binding on every party. But if some, while arriving at that conclusion, certain observations have been made by the Supreme Court, then those observations may be obiter, which are not necessary for making a decision in that case. So that kind of obiter is also sometimes relevant so far as application by the tribunal and the courts are concerned. But this kind of obiter is not binding on the Supreme Court itself. That is my understanding of the law as a student of law. So I thought I'll just supplement what Shri Balwinder Singh ji has said.
Absolutely, sir. Point taken. And similarly, there was one more statement which I wanted to kind of pick up and say now. It says, and this is specific to this particular case only, since default is more than 3 years, the same would not amount to debt due and payable under the code. Right now, they have gone through the details. They have seen NCLT, NCLAT order. They've heard both the legal counsels. They went through the different case laws where they themselves were like the original jurisdiction they had while giving their judgment. So, but this statement, if it's picked up and it's shown to people, it just says default is more than 3 years. The same would not amount to debt due and payable under the code. Now, though it's actually a ratio, frankly, right? Because that's the crux of this entire thing. And that is what will perplex a lot of people, and they'll say, well, that's what Supreme Court said. Nobody's wanted to go back and see whether it was a continued default, what was NPA, what was a default date, but they'll say, okay, we don't care. 3 years old default, you didn't do what you were supposed to. Hence, it's not a debt and not payable under the code. So, but sir, I don't know. I mean, if you want to add any comment, but I can move on.
I think Mr. Malhotra has also already dealt with it. That it is only one sentence, that's all. It is probably building up the case to decide, but it is not the end. This is only to say some statement. I mean, he has covered it very well.
Absolutely. Point taken. So, sir, now just three larger issues where I've kind of I'm done with the specific judgment and the order. We had some queries also where I collated, and these are the larger issues which are like about the evolving IBC space. So it's more of a combination of a suggestion and a query, and it'll be nice to have your comment on that. One is Section 238, which is the overriding clause we have in IBC, really losing its teeth when we are trying to justify it against other laws, starting from Companies Act, Contract Act, Transfer of Property Act, PMLA, etc. Because what happens is, as I also said in my opening remarks, all these statutes, by default, unsaid but accepted premise was that the company is a going concern and it's a perpetual entity. So any statute you create, that this is the way it should be, or this is the remedy and all that. But again, the moment we compare it with IBC is only one law where it can spell the death knell of a company. Now, anything which you are kind of, creating as a statute or as a policy for a company as a going concern perpetual entity should not apply in exactly the same shape and format in a IBC situation, in a CRP, because you never know. 6 months, 1 year down the line, we are not left with the company at all. So this overriding clause has a certain merit and it needs to be given the adequate weightage, which over the period we felt that it is kind of getting diluted. So what do you say on this?
I don't really feel that probably that has been diluted too much. It has not been diluted. You see, again, look what 238 says. Not if there is inconsistency. That the first part is inconsistency.
Great, sir.
You see, if there is inconsistency, then only probably 238. If there is no inconsistency, that variance out. And
Agreed.
then what probably, okay, in that context only when I said it, the first phase company, then IBC, then again into the Companies Act. You see, these are the three phases. Now, if you really see what we are trying to do insolvency of the obligations, debt, default, etc. on the initiation date, when initiation has been done for insolvency. Because from that phase, if it is a running concern, it is an ongoing concern. We are going to resolve what is the state of affairs when the insolvency has been initiated. After the initiation and CIRPA process, that is a different phase. Because it is a super priority expenditure also. The financing which will take will be also super priority. Isn't it something different?
Sure.
I mean, if you really see so. So the only thing is that you will be resolving the old one only. You will not resolve the current one.
Great.
I mean, I think so that in case something PMLA etc. has taken in that place and its financial implication will be settled, not the legal defaults, not the legal misdemeanor. You see my point?
Yeah.
The
Right.
issue is here only that the financial implications will be resolved here, so that sustainable debt or the company is put back into the pool. But if in that phase, apart from this, like I am saying, we have not paid the loan, my business was in loss, nobody will be punished. But if the
Right.
business has gone into loss, that somebody did something wrong, those are the areas which are dealing with something else. That is not inconsistent with our law. You see, our law is okay. No, there is a little bit of problem, but I don't want to digress. That is a separate issue. You see what happened? When PMLA, etc., you say so, the money has come actually, one is the company which came. If you really say whosoever inducted the PMLA funds, his asset is not the assets of the company. His assets will be loans and advances. His assets will be share market, shares he has acquired with this money. Not the assets. Assets will remain of the company. Only probably the individual, he made the resources to acquire his assets. His assets are either giving loans to these people or have the share capital of the company, but not the assets of the company. Here we are resolving the assets of the company and liability of the company, not assets and liability of promoter, manager, anybody. You see, that's where there is no inconsistency there. I hope I made my point.
Got it. Absolutely. It's a great.
Mr. Sanjeev, I think we are running out of time. There may be many interesting questions. I know the participants are also taking a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And I think Mr. GP Madan also want to ask a question.
Sure.
Maybe I think Chakshu, you can unmute Mr. Madan. Let him ask the question so that we can then finally wind up the session for
Right.
today.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And my question is to Honorable Balwinder Singh Ji. Sir, you just, Mr. Sanjeev raised a very pertinent question in the case of that management of the corporate debtor should be kept away from the management. In that case, actually, this statement was given in Swiss Ribbons in January 2019. And then in February, March, we had whole lot of cases where Honorable Appellate Tribunal has decided the moment a company goes into liquidation, Section 230 of the Companies Act 2013 should be applicable. And there the promoters who are even barred under 29A, they may submit a scheme of under Section 230, scheme of arrangement. And it went on for next 8 months. Ultimately, in October 2019, in Gujarat and Court, same Honorable Appellate Tribunal comes up with a judgment that no, the promoters who are barred under 29A, they cannot be given an opportunity to file a scheme under 230, and then Swiss Ribbon's judgment is quoted in that judgment. So what has actually gone on? There was no change in law during this 8-9 months. And appellate tribunal was absolutely in favor of the promoters. All of a sudden, there was a U-turn. And now they are saying they are quoting Swiss Ribbons, which are in January 2019. Your view, sir?
So, just a minute, can I intervene? I would request the participants, because today's discussion is confined to the Limitation Act, which the IBC, more particularly with reference to the Supreme Court judgment, I think the questions we can confine only to this particular aspect only, because if we start discussing the whole gamut of IBC, I think it will be never ending. There can be other forums, other platforms, and other webinars where we can raise all other issues on which we are making discussions. So my suggestion to the participants will be, our questions should relate only to the topic of the day. It can't be open-ended. This is my request to all the participants.
Agree, sir. Agree. I raised this question because the topic was that. Otherwise, I always try to confine to the theme, sir. Thank you very much.
Please.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Balwinder ji.
Should I respond?
Sir.
Yeah.
Okay. You see, there is a, I will be frank. 230, how many proposals have come so far? I'm not very sure. Not more than 1 or 2. Number one. You see, it was probably this 230 was brought something because this existed under the winding up procedure, even under the Companies Act. Because even during when the companies were under winding up, the schemes can be formulated and brought. Now, you see, in fact, actually, if you really see, I put it from the 2 angles. It was a court-driven decision that during winding up, you can bring out a scheme. The whole resolution process actually has been that scheme only. That because we have brought down the winding up itself into 2 segments. That the first is the resolution phase and the second is a liquidation phase. Earlier, it was all going under winding up only. So, which probably the suggestion at that time was there, that has been formulated under IBC. Number one. Now, probably it went on because probably, obviously, the lawyers have pointed out, sir, this existed. So, this has come under liquidation also. But I am personally having a doubt on the efficacy of that system, because having already done this exercise, all open transferred through third mechanism, party mechanism, I am not expecting much actually to happen under 230. This is what is my take. Because already this process is gone. That all people have been agreed to. Whosoever now will out, he would had the opportunity earlier also. Because earlier also, the management did have the opportunity, they are not having an opportunity. So, I think probably it was more as a precaution. That in case something can be saved, save it. But probably I have not found that this has succeeded, or probably many proposals have come. I think from efficiency principle, I didn't think it delivered anything. Thank you.
Sanjeev ji, can we close it now?
Sir, एक query और लेते हैं हम.
Please.
One gentleman has asked that para 33.1 and 39 should be discussed. So I've quickly gone through again, So 39 actually says that, because section 7 will be barred, this particular petition will be barred under, Limitation Act. So moratorium will be lifted. And now any other proceedings which were there, which were put on a stay because of the moratorium, will continue. So apparently, one of the participants really wanted to understand, which essentially means the query is also probably related that after 2 years, again, we go back to DRT and now say, okay, now restart the process, because that 2 years, what we've lost in between was because of a certain process which has been annulled. So I think that is one query what they have. Second point is, they are saying only a particular date of default, which was 2011, was mentioned, and there was no attempt made by the respondents at NCLT or NCLAT with regards to the acknowledgement which happened later. Now, frankly, my view is, sir, before kind of, I asked you for comments. One is that once we go through the full application and the full proceedings at NCLT, at NCLAT, there is a clear-cut reference of, balance sheet acknowledgement. There is a reference of OTS. So whenever anything is read, I think it has to be read in totality. It's not necessary that every form, every application at every stage, we should be putting all the things together. So that's one. And on the other part, I'm sure the very fact that they are quashing the entire process and declaring annulment of this entire process, then I'm sure the respondents have the liberty to go back to DRT and reinstate their cases. So that was my view on this. Yes,
no, let me make it a point. Moratorium didn't mean that the cases have gone away. The cases continue there. You see, the moratorium didn't say that they have been quashed. Only moratorium is there that has been frozen. So this has been unfrozen now. So they don't have to get it restored. The cases were there already.
Okay, fair enough. So
the cases have not gone there. Okay. So they have only to proceed further. That moratorium is gone. So what probably consequences which probably we noted earlier, that we are going back to the old systems rather than the new. That's all. That is what I noted and made an observation in that context only. I hope that is one clarification there. Absolutely. Isn't it? So it is not gone. So now probably, so those people don't have to reinstitute. They will have to proceed in that cases. Only bring to their notice there is no moratorium and go further. You see, that is what will be done. So that, that is what will take care of it. That is this part only. Now, in the fact and circumstances when something is done, I will only put it there. Probably people have to be more conscious when they are filing their applications, that in case of default is old one, they don't have to mention that default only. If the default subsequently ratified, you have to put in the place that the other date also, that it is valid as on so date also. I think probably the mistake we are making is under that column only, first default away, revalidated this, and this is the default within which the limitation is. I mean, I think probably they have to be more specific there. We have written more story. We have written more story because it is so long written under this agreement, But the crucial date and default dates, their focus, probably we can say so, line revalidated. This is the date up to which I have revalidated. Next, within 3 months, I am coming up. 3 years, I am coming up. I mean, you have to build up a story.
Absolutely, it's a very important insight and an important takeaway from
that application itself has to be very specific, making the story, not actually writing whole lot of things that can be put into the next year. This story, very short, the column, come up to the date so that where you are within the limitation. That should be apparent from the first column itself, not actually the next documents. In the same document.
In the same document.
Which is a default, and default revalidated on so-and-so date, letter number so-and-so, revalidated under so-and-so, the last revalidation application made within period.
Got it. Absolutely.
Isn't it? Yeah. Great. I hope that will be a practical tip to be given.
No, absolutely, sir. That's a great takeaway. And I think, it's like trying to ensure that we don't leave any loopholes in our application, in our process.
Let me be frank and tell it. Adjudicating authority, they are the people who are not going to look into each line by line reading. Only something when people are pointing it out, they look into. Because 400 pages we don't read. And let me be very frank, we don't read 400 pages of application.
Agreed.
Only the crucial facts are pointed out and we read it.
Agreed.
Okay? And the crucial facts must be put at a place where it is readable, and it is within our reach to read it, not put into the lectures.
Got it. Absolutely, sir. So I think I'll take just a last question, which is a small group of IPs who kind of had put it to me, where they're saying the way today we are saddled with this entire, I mean, not exactly a U-turn, but the kind of changes we require in our minds once we are as practitioners on the ground and we are answerable to the stakeholders as a frontline soldiers, as practitioners. So the query is, sir, for maximization of value or recovery, proper adhering to the laid out law is important. But that very law is undergoing a regular tweaks, right? So hence it is making a challenge for us, for now, at least. Now, as a suggestion, can we actually have a concept of advanced ruling, right, on matters like this? Because what is happening is, it will give clarity to all the practitioners, it will avoid unnecessary litigation. But the very genesis of this suggestion is, sir, that every now and then, any authority, be it adjudicating authority, appellate, or Supreme Court, they get specific facts, they get specific stakeholders, specific arguments. But what happens? There is a tendency to generalize, an issue, a judgment, and then, it becomes all pervasive, applicable everywhere. Whereas an issue which in any case is going to hurt everyone, for example, the balance sheet acknowledgement. For example, till today, I understand there is slight area about a security deposit, right? Other than if somebody is shown in a liability side, then for sure it's a liability. It's accepted by the corporate data, but there wasn't enough clarity for very long that how a security deposit should be treated. Is it really a liability just because it is being shown? Because it does not have potentially a time value of money if you don't have an agreement or something. So these kind of situations or cases or issues, when they are brought up, maybe it will be great if we have a mechanism of advance ruling so that we don't have to wait for a particular case, raise these kind of issues, and then it becomes very specific to that case. And tomorrow we might have an issue. So that was my suggestion, sir.
No, I will only give something food for thought. Food for thought to your professional bodies.
Oh, sure.
They have to prepare the expert papers or research papers for this. I mean,
okay,
that is what the bodies are there. Like
agreed.
Our institutes of either company secretary or IPPs, because they have to have some budget for research also. These issues
Agreed.
have to be prepared as a research paper. And a research paper, because you see, what you made it a point, I have been actually saying the people, research papers are not interested in outcome of a particular case. They are holistic.
Yeah.
They are, that's why the books, we will refer to it if there is an expert paper, expert committee, something. Institutes like you have 3-4 institutions,
Right.
that in case they make on some particular topic some research paper, okay, that will have a more weight than the lawyer who is standing for it, because lawyer is obviously biased in favor of the client, but the research paper is not in favor of anybody.
Agreed, sir. Point
I think this is a food for thought for you people.
Agreed, sir.
I think probably that is your institutes, etc. They have to do their own homework, because you let me make it a point, only the final. Institutes are for improvement of the systems in the country also.
Yes.
That is their professional. Profession is how he is earning his money. Professionally is earning his money through his services. Institutes are for making advancement of stretching the limits of knowledge, making it more efficient also.
Agreed.
I think
absolutely, sir. Mr. Malhotra is sitting there, so my job is relatively easy. That yes, we had it from you as a suggestion, food for thought. So absolutely well taken, sir, and very well said. I totally accept. So
precisely, sir, this is what we are doing in the institute, ICSI, IIP also, that disseminating the knowledge, getting input from others, publishing research paper, getting queries from the people, answering their queries. But so far as particular question raised by Mr. Sanjeev is concerned with regard to authority for advance ruling in the case of insolvency process, my advice to the IPs will be, please have a look at the areas where authority for advance ruling is already working in the direct tax matter as well as an indirect matter. Has it really achieved the objective for which the authority for advance ruling was established? I think there is a question mark to that. We should look into that. And if they have really worked there successfully, maybe we can conceive an idea here also. But if there are issues there, and in spite of these authority for advance ruling being there for the last more than 1.5 decade or more than 2 decades, then should we really go for such one more authority where the things will go on endlessly? I think that's a question mark I'm putting at that. Maybe IPs can consider that and think over that. With that, I think Sanjeev ji, do you have anything else to add?
No, sir. I'm really good. I'm done with my kind of my bit, and we've gone through the queries. And I really thank Mr. Singh and yourself Over to you, sir.
So a bundle of thanks to Shri Balwinder Singh ji for sparing time, for his food of thought and the kind of ideas which he has given to all of us, which I think we will be working on that also. And Sanjeev ji, thank you very much for putting all these questions in a seriatim and covering almost all the questions which were coming from the participants. I think the participants all of us are benefited by the talk which we had in this today's webinar. Over to you, Mr. Chakshu, for a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much, sir. So please accept our sincere thanks, Honorable Shri Balwinder Singh ji, Shri P.K. Malhotra and C.S. Sanjeev Ahuja ji, for sharing the views on the subject. So it was very interesting to hear about her experience and knowledge on the subject matter, and it also gave us a close look on the judgment as well. Thank you so much for sharing your time and experiences, sir. We also thank our participants, our esteemed members who spared their time and actively participating in the event. So thanks once again for a truly memorable evening, sir.
Great, sir.
Thank you all of us.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, sir. Thank you.